Alright, Karina baby, I'm going to read you the 15th, which is the last gingerbread man. When I was passing by Baker's shop, I saw something that made me stop. A gingerbread man all by himself, flat on his back, on the window shelf. It was a gingerbread brown from his head to his toes, with 2 raisin eyes and a nut for a nose. And something about him seemed to say, "Please, will you buy me and take me away?" So I bought the very last gingerbread man. Now I'm eating him up as fast as I can. The Gingerbread Man. Okay, I'm also going to read you the tale of Miss Tittlemouse. Once upon a time there was a wood mouse and her name was Mrs. Tittlemouse. She lived in a bank under a hedge. Such a funny house. There were yards and yards of sandy passages leading to the storerooms, and nut cellars, and seed cellars, and amongst the roots of the hedge. There was a kitchen, a parlor, a pantry, and a larder. Also there was Mrs. Tittletill's bedroom, where she slept in a little box bed. Miss Tittlemouse was the most terribly tiny, peculiar little mouse. She was always sweeping and dusting a soft sandy floor, because a beetle lost its way in the passage. "Shh, shh, little dirty feet," said Mrs. Tittlemouse, clattering her dustpan. There she is. Isn't she just so cute? And she's always sweeping the floor. That's where she sleeps, and this is where she sweeps. And one day a little old woman ran up and down in a red spotty cloak. "Your house is on fire, Mother Ladybug. Fly away home to your children." Another day a big flat spider came in the shelter from the rain. "Beg pardon, is this not Miss Muffet's? Go away, you bold bad spider, leaving end to the cobweb all over my nice clean house." She borrowed the spider out at a window, and let himself down the hedge with a long, thin bit of string. Mrs. Tittletil went on her way to a distant storeroom to fetch cherry stems and thistle down seed for dinner. Also along the passage she sniffed and looked at the door. "I smell a smell of honey. It is the cow sleeps outside in the hedge. I can see the marks of little dirty feet." Suddenly round the corner she met the bitty bumble. "Bzz, bzz, bzz," says the bumblebee. Mrs. Tittletil looks at her severely. She wished that she had a broom. "Good day, bitty bumblebee. I should be glad to buy some beeswax. But what are you doing down here? Why do you always come in at the window and say bzz, bzz, bzz?" Mrs. Tittlemouse began to get cross. So she got upset because, look at, the ladybug is there. Alright? She has all these visitors. She doesn't want any of the visitors. She doesn't want the spider. She doesn't want the ladybug. She doesn't want the bumblebee visiting her. She's always cleaning her house. So she doesn't want all these visitors at her house. But they're coming, and she's like, "I wish I had my broom." She started to get a little cross with the bumblebee, huh? "Zzz, whiz, whiz," replied Bitty Bumblebee in a peevish squeak. She settled down a passage and disappeared into a storeroom, which had been used for acorns. Mrs. Tittletil had eaten the acorns before Christmas. The storeroom ought to have been empty, but it was full of untidy, dry moss. Mrs. Tittletil began to pull out the moss. 3 or 4 other bees put their heads out and bzzed frantically. I am not in the habit of letting lodgings in an interversion, said Mrs. Tiltil. I will have them turned out. Bzz, bzz, bzz. I wonder who would help me. Bzz, whizz, bzz. I will not have Mr. Jackson. He never wipes his feet. Mrs. Tittletil decided to leave the bees till after dinner. When she got back to the parlor, she heard someone coughing in a fat voice. And there was Mr. Jackson himself. He was sitting all over a small rocking chair, twiddling his thumbs and smiling, with his feet on the fender. He lived in the drain below the lodge in a very dirty, wet ditch. How do you do, Mr. Jackson? Dearie me, have you got very wet? Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mrs. Tittlemouse. I'll sit a while and dry myself, said Mr. Jackson. He sat and smiled, and the water dripped off of his coat-tails. Mrs. Tittletil went round with a mop. So what is Miss Tittletil doing? She is trying to clean up after everybody, including herself. He sat such a while that he had to be asked if he would like to take some dinner. First she offered him some cherry stones. Thank you, Mrs. Tittlemouse. No teeth, no teeth, no teeth, said Mr. Jackson. He opened his mouth most unnecessarily wide. He certainly had not a tooth in his head. Then she offered him some thistledown seed, tiddly, widdly, widdly, puff, poof, puff, said Mr. Jackson. He blew the tiddly down and all over the room. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Mrs. Tittlemouse. Now what I really, really should like would be a little dish of honey. I am afraid I have not got any, Mr. Jackson, said Mrs. Tittlemouse. Tiddly widdly widdly, Mrs. Tittlemouse, said the smiling Mr. Jackson. I can smell it. This is why I came to call. Mr. Jackson rose ponderously. Mr. Jackson rose ponderously from the table and began to look into the cupboards. Mrs. Tittlemouse followed him with a dishcloth to wipe his large wet footprints off the parlor floor. When he had convinced himself that there was not honey in the cupboards, he began to walk down the passage. Indeed, indeed, you will stick fast, Mr. Jackson. Tiddly widdly widdly, Mrs. Tittlemouse. So she told him that there's no honey. He wants honey. So he's going through all of her cupboards as she's cleaning of his feet prints. Because he wants honey, but he doesn't believe that she doesn't have any honey when she told him she doesn't have any honey. Because she doesn't. Let's see what happens. First he squeezed into the pantry. Tiddly widdly widdly. No honey? No honey, Mrs. Tittlemouse. There were 3 creepy-crawly people hiding in the plate rack. 2 of them got away, but the littlest one he caught. Then he squeezed into the ladder. Mrs. Butterfly was testing the sugar, but she flew away out the window. Tiddly widdly widdly, Mrs. Tittlemouse, you seem to have plenty of visitors. And without any invitation, said Mrs. Thomasina Tittlemouse. So what's happening? People are coming over her house with no invitation. She's not inviting any of these people. They're just showing up, and then she's cleaning up after them. So they went along the sandy passage. Tiddly widdly, bzz, whiz, whiz. He met Bumblebee around the corner and snapped her up. and put her down again. I do not like bumblebees at all. Over bristles, said Mr. Jackson, wiping his mouth with his coat sleeve. Get out, you nasty old toad, shrieked bitterly Bumblebee. I shall go distracted, scolded Mrs. Tittlemouse. She shut herself up in a nut cellar while Mr. Jackson pulled out the bumble nest. He seemed to have no objection to sitting. When Mrs. Tittlemouse ventured to come out, everybody has gone away. But the untidiness was something dreadful. Never do I see such a mess. Smears of honey and mouse, and twiddle down, and marks of big little dirty feet, all over my nice clean house. Mrs. Tittlemouse likes it very clean, and all of her visitors are just destroying her nice clean house, and she doesn't like it. But she found the honey. There's honey smears now, so let's see what happens. And look at that frog. He's afraid of the bee. See the froggy? The froggy's afraid of the bee up here. Alright, so she gathered up the moss and the remains of the beeswax. Then she went out and fetched some twigs and partly closed up the front door. I will make it too small for Mr. Jackson. So she made the opening to her front door too small for Mr. Jackson. She fetched some soft soap and fennel and some new scrubbing brush from the storeroom, and then she went and was too tired to do any more. First she fell asleep in her chair, and then she went to bed. Will I ever be tidy again? Said poor Miss Tittlemouse. The next morning she got up very early and began the spring cleaning, which lasted a fortnight. She swept and scrubbed and dusted, and she rubbed up the furniture with beeswax and polish from her tin spoon. When it was all beautifully neat and clean, she gave a party to 5 other little mice without Mr. Jackson. He smelt the party and came up the bank, but he could not squeeze into the front door. So she gave a party for her mice friends that she wanted to have over. Look at her, she got so tired she fell asleep in her little rocking chair. So they handed him an acorn cup full of honeydew through the window, and he was not at all offended. He sat outside in the sun and said, "Tiddly-widdly-widdly, your very good health, Mrs. Tittlemouse." So he wished her good health. Alright, Karina, baby. Mama loves you. I love you more than you could have imagined. I miss you more than you could imagine. This whole virus thing has got to eventually stop because Mama's waiting for custody court to open up so that I can actually see you. Mama loves you. I love you so very, very, very much. Alright, baby. I love you.